free space in front of me, so don't go. That's why we get so uptight, so angry, because we feel like if someone defies me, we are losing me. We're losing ourselves. And we feel that if we surrender ourselves to Jesus, then we'll lose ourselves. But it's exactly the opposite of the world, because in reality, when I'm pridefully defiant of the things around me, that's when I do lose myself. It works like this. I spend so much time opposing you and others and other ideas that by the end of the day, I've said no so many times, I don't know who I am anymore. I just say no, 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 no. See, a 2-year-old does that. A 2-year-old learns how to say no, and they say no to everything. And you can say to that 2-year-old, I want you to eat your ice cream, and they'll say no. Just because they're 2 and they've learned no. And that's what we do all the time. We're defiant. We say no, 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 and then in the process we have not said yes to anything because we don't know who we are anymore. But Jesus himself says that your identity comes after you surrender to me. Look at these next 2 verses now, 24 and 25. Jesus says to his disciples, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. Jesus says, if you want to become more of you, don't defy the world and don't defy me. Defy who you think you're supposed to be. Deny yourself. Submit completely to Jesus, because he's the one who made you. And he's the one who can make you into who you're supposed to be. So, I want to try to step back a little bit and make this practical for us. Because, see, we don't like to think of ourselves as pridefully defiant. We don't like to think of ourselves as being rebellious people. We're not that way. We're in church this morning, right? None of us are defiant when it comes to Jesus. If Jesus says something, we're just going to go say, yeah, that's true. I'm totally in submission to Jesus, right? I mean, that's why we're here at church, okay? So I'm going to draw this out practically speaking to you just a little bit. And I'm going to say that it all begins with Peter, with Jesus' question, where he said, who am I? In fact, there are 3 blanks I want you to write down now, and these form 3 questions. Together, they form one big question, one big decision you need to make. And here's how it goes. It goes like this. Who is Jesus? What is my purpose? And what will distract me? Who is Jesus? What is my purpose? And what will distract me? See, that's really what Peter's going through. Who is Jesus? Well, he's the Christ. Until he starts talking about stuff I don't agree with. And then he's a brother that I can rebuke. See, that's the problem. The reason Peter's identity flip-flops between Peter and Satan, the reason his purpose flip-flops between being a foundation and being a stumbling stone, the reason his distractibility is all up so that one time he's hearing God, another time he's hearing people, he's hearing himself, whatever. The reason all that stuff is wavery and flaky and up and down and has no serious momentum is the first question. Is Jesus really Lord? Is he really the Christ? Is he really the anointed Son of God, came to save the world? Or is he just another dude? The intensity with which you answer that first question determines everything else. But you and I fool ourselves and we don't know how intensely we've answered that question. And so you start at the bottom. Let me just ask you, what has distracted you from living the life God has called you to live? Is Jesus really your Lord? I mean, think about this. Because Jesus says, give 10% of everything you make to the work of God in this world. And then give more, sacrificially from who you are. And then be a person who's giving and generous, not just with your money. That's what Jesus says. Are you being distracted by your finances? If so, maybe the first question up there for you, who is Jesus? He's a guy who gives some good advice, but some of the advice I don't keep. Or is he Lord? Is he God? Is he in charge? Is he ruling? See, the intensity of how you answer that question determines whether or not you will make it through the rest. Jesus says to look at a person lustfully is to commit adultery with them in their heart. How many of you in this room, don't raise your hands, because someone might see you, but how many of you in this room would say, yeah, you've clicked on those links. You've seen those pictures. You've gone to those websites. You've opened the magazine. You've rented those movies. Yeah? Yeah? Is Jesus your Lord? Or is he just some dude who gave some advice that sometimes you pay attention to? The intensity with which you answer the top question determines what your purpose is. It determines your identity. It determines what's going to distract you from your purpose. It determines everything else. And we step back like Peter, and we live in prideful defiance, saying, no, it's really about me and what I want, and it's not about the fact that Jesus is Lord. I want to show you, hopefully briefly, how this affected Peter's life. We're going to jump over to chapter John, the book of John, chapter 13, John chapter 13, and I'm going to carry you through a journey on how Peter ended up. Chapter 13, verse 1, John. It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. A different Simon, it's not Simon Peter. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Defiant. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then, Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Defiant. Jesus is washing feet here. He's not giving Peter a whole sponge bath. Peter's got his own idea of what needs to happen, and he's not paying attention to Jesus. Just a tiny little moment of defiance, a tiny little moment of picking himself, of being prideful rather than surrendering to Jesus. Watch where it takes us. Go on to John chapter 13. Now we're looking at verse 36 through 38. Simon Peter asked Jesus, Lord, where are you going? Jesus replied, where I'm going you cannot follow now, but you will follow later. Peter asked, Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. Defiant. I want to follow you now, Jesus. Then Jesus answered, will you really lay down your life for me? I tell you the truth, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Flip over to John chapter 18, beginning in verse 8, and you're going to see something interesting here. John 18, beginning in verse 8. We're now in the garden where Jesus is about to be captured. They said they were looking for Jesus of Nazareth. Verse 8, I told you that I am he, Jesus answered. If you're looking for me, then let these men go. Let these men go. Jesus wants the disciples to leave. This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. I have not lost one of those you gave me. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? Peter brings out a sword. Jesus is going calmly, but Peter's defiant. I'm not going to let this happen. I'm bringing out a sword. No, no, no. It's just a string. He's saying it over and over again. Keep going. There's another interesting thing happening here. Look at verse 12. Look at verse 15. After Jesus is carried away, verse 15, Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Didn't Jesus just say earlier, you can't follow me? Now, Jesus meant, I'm going to die and you can't follow me into death, but one of these days you will. That's what Jesus meant. But right here, what Jesus is saying, and what Peter would have heard, is you can't follow me. And now Peter's following him. Defiant. Look where it leads him. We're following Jesus because this other disciple was known to the high priest. He went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, but Peter had to wait outside the door. At the door. The other disciple who is known to the high priest came back, spoke to the girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. You're not one of his disciples, are you? The girl at the door asked. Of course he is. John, the other disciple who was with him, is the one who went in there and said, oh, by the way, my buddy's out at the door. Let's go get him too. Of course he's another follower, because John just said it. But now the woman at the door is just, asking the rhetorical question that she already knows the answer to. And Peter's freaked out because he said no so many times. He's rejected Jesus so many times. What does he say? I am not. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself. Skip down to verse 25. As Simon Peter stood warming himself, he was asked, you're not one of his disciples, are you? He denied it, saying, I am not. One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off. I think you would remember the dude that cut off your cousin's ear. Challenged him, didn't I see you with him in the olive grove? Yes, you're the dude with the sword. Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment a rooster began to crow. Sometimes this is told as the story of Peter denying Jesus 3 times. And that's not really true, because he doesn't deny anything about Jesus. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is the Christ. Peter doesn't say anything against that. What Peter is doing is he's denying himself and his relationship to Jesus. Twice, Peter says, I am not. The pattern of prideful defiance plays itself out into a person who can't even say the thing that he really is. If you took Peter into a quiet room off to the side, if you sat him down with a comfortable environment and just asked him the question, Peter, what do you think about Jesus? He would say, Jesus is my favorite person in the whole world. I love Jesus more than anything. I would cut off a guy's ear to protect my Jesus. He is the most important thing in my life. He would say that. But for some reason, it has developed into this heart condition so much that he's just saying no after no after no after no, until finally when people say to him, are you a follower of Jesus? In the pressure of that moment,